Property Tribes on location in Newcastle, and I'm joined once again by one of Property Tribes' top contributors, Elaine Power, aka Dyslexic Landlord. And DL, as we've said in the other interviews, you've been a landlord since 1982, and you've been through so many changes and property cycles and property crashes. But I'm thinking that perhaps that the last sort of 3 to 4 years, have you witnessed change, kind of velocity of change, an amount of change greater than any time before in your landlord life?
Well, I think to say it, they've got it in for us, would be an underestimation. I think we've been hammered from every which way we possibly can. Mm-hmm. Of course, the famous Section 24, yep, which has been the most unfair set of taxes they've ever thought of. I can understand why the government did it, but the retrospective angle of it was totally uncalled for. Indeed. And it's only going to cause harm. Mm-hmm. It's not going to cause any. It's not going to make the PRS any better. It's just going to cause rents to go up, mm-hmm, and cause landlords a lot of anxiety, mm-hmm, and to the point where they will leave, what have you. Because that's what we have at the end of the day. We have a choice. Do we want to stay in this game of monopoly, or do we want to leave this game of monopoly? Mm-hmm. And the government should be very, very careful to what it does regarding this. Mm-hmm. The buy-to-let market has been a success. When I look back at the times when I started off in the 80s to where it is now, mm-hmm, we have done marvellous things. We've created a lot of wealth. We've created a lot of homes for people to rent. And there'll be people who will say, yes, but you've taken away the bread out the mouth of the home buyers. We have, and there's no doubt about that at all. We have taken property on. But that's because of market. If the government had built houses and allowed building of houses, that wouldn't be the case. Mm-hmm. We are being punished from a government policy, mm-hmm, of lack of houses being built.
And you are quite disillusioned with the Conservatives, aren't you? Because they previously were supportive of entrepreneurialism and of business, but they really have stuck the knife into landlords.
They haven't only stuck the knife in, but they've done it and smiled. They seem to have got some great joy out of doing what they've done to people. I was probably always been a Tory supporter, to a lesser extent, not a massive extent, because being a Tory supporter in the North East doesn't count for very much. But they have stabbed their core voters in the back, and as I say, they've smiled doing it. Mm-hmm. And they're now, I think, beginning to wonder what they've done. For lots and lots of reasons, but George Osborne has not been on my Christmas card list for some time.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you're not alone in that. Now, let's just talk specifically about Section 24, because you've created a number of threads to discuss this on Property Tribes, and you've described it as a landlord killer. And really, I guess a lot of it is to do with leverage. When you started out, you were able to leverage up. That game is gone. That game is over. The game has changed.
Absolutely, 100%. I was averaging out 85% loan to value, mm-hmm, on properties I was buying before the crash. That then dropped down to 75% value, loan to value after the crash. But you can't just think to yourself, well, I'm going to rely on capital growth, I'm going to do this, and I know for a fact it's going to make money. The old rich dad, poor dad book, yeah, because the taxation system will not allow you to do that, mm-hmm, one way or another. Whether you're doing it via a company or whether you're doing it in your own name, the game has changed. Mm-hmm. The ball game has changed. There is a margin, mm-hmm, for a landlord to keep property in their own name, mm-hmm, but there's a ceiling to it. And if you start going above that ceiling and start leveraging up more and more and more, the chances are you're going to have a problem. Now, the thing I didn't factor in, to be fair, was the chances of the 40% threshold being moved. Mm-hmm. We've got to 50,000 now for income to 20%, and I think the government are not going to change Section 24. I am quite sure they're not going to change Section 24, and I've always said that. But I think what they can do is they can move the threshold up, which will help landlords avoid a lot of it. Mm-hmm. I think politically we haven't got a chance, mm-hmm, but I think the fact of that, if we got more allowances, mm-hmm, to the 40% band, to whatever that may be, mm-hmm, that would help an awful lot of landlords, mm-hmm, out with this one. Mm-hmm. But there is a ceiling, without a doubt at all, if you're borrowing money.
Indeed. Now, one of the things that you're very keen to get across on Property Tribes to newcomer landlords is that the game has changed. And even my generation of landlord who started 15 years ago, I was heavily influenced by Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book by Robert Kiyosaki, that did influence a whole generation of landlords. Do you think that book should still be referenced, or is that book in the past now?
I think the book still has relevance, but the relevance, you've got to factor in government policy.
Yeah.
You've got to factor in what they want from us and what they don't want from us, and what they're going to take from us, which is more important. So it has relevance, but it shouldn't be treated as a Bible. Especially the UK. It might work in California still, or New York, but it doesn't work in Newcastle. And I'm sure as the numbers, because our houses prices in the northeast are much lower than the south, of course, and of course the larger the amount the figures are, the more Section 24 will have an impact. And in some respects, the northeast landlord is lucky because we haven't got the massive figures as people have got in the southeast of England. But it is relevant. You still can use Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but then the principle's right, but then you've got to look at the taxation.
So do you fear for highly leveraged landlords, particularly in the southeast?
Yes, I do. I do. I think we're in a market now where house prices are not rocketing away. Section 24 is now in its third year. It finishes off next year in the fourth year. I still think there's an awful lot of landlords who are investor landlords who don't treat this as a business, who just think of it as a hand to the accountant and away it goes. I think there's still shocks to be had with apathy of landlords, and I think it's a mathematical fact that if you get increases in interest rates, which have got to happen, landlords can go from a profitable situation into a deficit situation. So they've got to act and they've got to take it on board. I think we're still waiting for a number to do that.
Well, there's so much uncertainty around as well with Brexit, with the change of leadership. We don't know what's happening politically, and it's one thing that landlords don't like is uncertainty. It makes it very difficult for us to plan ahead and really mitigate risk, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. How can you plan to do a long-term investment when the market is changing so quickly? If we look back just for 4 or 5 years, you can't believe nobody ever forecast Section 24.
No.
What mind ever thought of it is beyond me altogether, because it goes against every business principle that ever was. And if they can do that, could they take it off altogether? Could they take tax-free altogether? I think there's a greater chance that they will possibly take it off altogether for personal investments. We saw Myras go. I was old enough to have Myras mortgages when I was a homeowner, and we saw that go eventually. And nobody ever thought it would, but it did. So there is a possibility. It all depends on whether the government say we have done enough, I would say damage, to landlords, to stop them buying, to stop them expanding, or do we carry on this stupid road of taxation on no profits. So I think there is it all depends on what the policymakers want us to do. But I think the Tories are going to have to learn some very, very quick lessons, not only from buy-to-let, but from every business owner that's in the UK. Because it's not just us who they've stabbed in the back, it's everybody who runs a company on the dividend taxes. And it's getting worse. It's not getting better. So where they're going with this, I don't quite follow. I don't understand it. Why they're killing people who want to make wealth for the country. I don't understand that at all.
No, I totally agree. I think the pendulum has, it often goes extreme one way first, and then it comes back and finds a balance. Clearly, we know that Section 24 in Ireland was cancelled after, I think it was 3 to 4 years because of the homeless problem. So, there's more pain to come around Section 24 for sure, as we go into the final kind of instalment of it, if you like. But DL, you grew your portfolio very quickly. because the conditions were there to enable you to do that. Do you think, and I hope you don't mind me saying, you've got around 100 properties in the Newcastle area, which is an amazing achievement, but do you think the days of those kind of super landlords like yourself are kind of over, and that landlords will remain with their kind of 3 or 4 properties kind of portfolio?
I think you've always going to have the place for the person who wants to run the supermarket operation. I think that's there. We're seeing this now with the institutions. Yes. They are what I call supermarket landlords. So if you want to play that game, I think you probably can move into that and do it. But I think when you look at the other side of it, the other side of the person who's working, the person who wants to leave a nest egg for the family, or for the person who wants to provide themselves a pension, I think there's a place for that. But it's just to be thought of a lot more than it used to be.
You certainly need a lot more cash now.
I think you need an awful lot more cash. Yeah. This is the bit that's changed, because now the lender wants to know where the money's coming from. If you can't remortgage it out, where are you going to get it from? It's got to come from savings or whatever to move that forward, and that's a major change. To actually say, well, I'm going to put 25% in there plus the stamp duty plus all the costs to buy that project, and then not get that money back quickly. It may take you 5 years of rent to get that money back in your pocket again. It's a long-term view. It
is indeed. And I guess just as we finish here, DL, we get a lot of newcomer landlords coming onto Property Tribes asking about how to get started. What would be your number one piece of advice for somebody starting out here in 2019 based on all your experience gathered since 1982?
Don't pay for education.
Oh, okay.
Don't go down to the flashy 5-star hotel with the man in the flashy suit who's going to sell you a Ferrari, a Lamborghini and a yacht. Put your feet on the ground, read on Property Tribes, go to landlord meetings, and they're all throughout the whole country, NLA meetings, RLA meetings. Mix with other landlords and talk to other landlords. Read the books, there's lots of them, but don't go and pay lots of money out to listen to somebody who's going to rip you off. And that's what I do honestly believe. It's there for free. You don't need to pay for it.
Oh, that's some very interesting advice. And would you recommend also to get professional and insured advice via a professional tax advisor, and also work with a good broker as well, because I think they're pivotal to people now?
I think you need a team of people around you all the time. I think you need to have the tax advisor who can keep you right on to which way you're going to go. You're going to have the accountant to do your books for you as well. You might even have an IFA who's going to give you information, and you've got to talk to more than one. Go and see 3 accountants. Sit down with them and ask them what their opinion is, how they should do this, how I should not do it, and then make your own mind up. A bit like picking your tenant. Doing the same thing and say, yeah, he's making sense, I understand him, he's a good guy, I know where he's at. But don't pay for education, but pay for good advice. Yeah,
no, totally agree. So DL, we're finishing out here now, but are you going to keep the faith with Buy to Let? Are you still committed? Are you still in it for the long term?
Yes, I am. I will not leave Buy to Let. I'll stay with it for probably the rest of my days. It gets me out of bed in the mornings, and I enjoy it. Yes. I think when the enjoyment goes, and my God, it's been challenged in the past 3 or 4 years. But I think no, I'm stubborn. I don't like saying no, and I'm going to bash on until the point where I probably leave this world in my little box.
So you're hanging in there. Yeah. Well, DL, thank you so much for joining me here on Property Tribes, and also I have to say on behalf of the property community, thank you so much for all the wonderful sage wisdom that you share with us every day. And also, I know you're out and about in the landlord community in Newcastle. You've been fighting against the licensing going on here. You're very, very engaged with it, and you still love it as much as you did when you started in 1982.
It's better than working. No, it is. It's a wonderful job. It's a good job. It's given me everything I could ever want and more. And I've met some great people. and that's what life's about. It's experiences.
Fantastic. Well, I've so enjoyed meeting you, and thank you for all the wisdom that you share, and thank you for being part of the Property Tribes community, because you're one of our most popular contributors there, and I read what you write every day and I get so much value from it as well. So thank you to DL, and if you've got any questions for DL, then please do drop them on the thread. She'd be more than happy to answer them for you, and I hope you've enjoyed this series of interviews with her, and it's great to meet you at last, Elaine.
I do too.
Thank you.
All the best.